On a November morning in 2017, a small team of physicists sat in front of a screen in Cairo and watched cosmic particles from outer space draw the outline of a room that no human being had entered in 4,500 years. It was not a legend. It was not a rumor passed down from a tomb robber's diary. It was data, hard and repeatable, generated by 3 separate detectors that had never spoken to each other, all pointing to the exact same conclusion. Somewhere above the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid of Giza, sealed inside 2.3 million blocks of limestone, there was a space the size of an airliner that nobody alive had ever seen. And nobody, to this day, fully knows what it was for. This is the story of how that space was found, why it took cosmic rays from dying stars to find it, and why the most honest answer scientists can give you even now is that they still don't know what they're looking at. To understand why this discovery mattered, you have to understand how little has actually changed inside the Great Pyramid since the 9th century. In the year 820, the Caliph Al-Ma'mun sent workers tunneling through solid stone because he believed the pyramid held treasure. They found no gold. What they did find, almost by accident, was the network of passages that tourists still walk through today. The descending corridor, the ascending corridor, the Grand Gallery rising toward the king's chamber. For 1,100 years after that forced entry, those tunnels were treated as the complete map of the pyramid's interior. Explorers assumed that whatever secrets the structure held, human hands had already found them all. The problem is that the Great Pyramid was never designed to be entered. It was sealed. The passages we walk through today exist only because someone broke in. And if a monument built with that much obsession over precision, alignment, and concealment was meant to hide something, the odds that Al-Ma'mun's crude tunneling happened to intersect with every important space inside it are, frankly, not good. That uncomfortable possibility sat mostly unexamined for over 1,000 years, until a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed in the early 2000s that the pyramid's internal structure might hold clues about how it was actually built. Houdin didn't have access to imaging technology that could see through solid rock. What he had was a theory and a hunch that the answer to one of archaeology's oldest engineering puzzles. How did Bronze Age workers lift 2.5 million blocks, some weighing as much as a small truck, to a height of 480 feet, might be hiding in plain sight inside the stone itself? The tool that finally let scientists test that hunch didn't come from archaeology at all. It came from particle physics, and its story begins not in Egypt, but in the 1960s, with a Nobel Prize-winning physicist named Luis Alvarez. Alvarez had spent the Second World War working on radar systems and later on the Manhattan Project, and by the 1960s, he had turned his attention to a much stranger question. Could you use cosmic rays to see inside a pyramid the way an X-ray sees inside a human body? The particles he was interested in are called muons. They're created constantly, high above our heads, when cosmic rays slam into the Earth's atmosphere at nearly the speed of light. Muons rain down on the planet every second of every day. They pass through your body right now, harmlessly, by the thousands. And crucially, they pass through solid rock too, but they lose energy doing it. Point a muon detector at a mountain or a pyramid and count how many particles make it through in different directions. And you can build a map of density, the same way a doctor reads a chest X-ray. Where there's more open space, more muons get through. Where there's solid stone, fewer do. In 1967, Alvarez set up detectors inside the Pyramid of Khafre, Giza's second-largest pyramid, hoping to find hidden chambers. After months of data collection, he found nothing. No secret rooms. It was, by his own account, a disappointing result, and for decades afterward, muon tomography as a tool for pyramid exploration was mostly shelved. The technology needed 50 more years to catch up to the ambition. By the 2010s, detectors had become dramatically more sensitive, and in 2015, an international collaboration of scientists from Japan, France, and Egypt launched a project called Scan Pyramids, with a straightforward, non-invasive goal. Use modern muon detectors, nuclear emulsion film, and infrared thermography to look inside Giza's pyramids without drilling a single hole. The project was run under the joint oversight of Cairo University and the French Hip Institute, with full cooperation from Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities, a detail worth pausing on, because this wasn't fringe research conducted in secret. It was published, peer-reviewed, mainstream science, carried out in full view of the international archaeological community. By 2016, the team had already found something unexpected: a void behind the pyramid's north face, near a mysterious chevron-shaped structure that had puzzled Egyptologists for over a century. But the discovery that made headlines around the world came in November 2017, when the team published its findings in the journal Nature, one of the most rigorously vetted scientific publications on Earth. 3 independent detection methods: nuclear emulsion film placed inside the Queen's chamber, scintillator detectors set up in the same location, and a separate gas detector positioned outside the pyramid entirely, had each, on their own, picked up the same anomaly: a large empty space, at least 98 feet long, sitting directly above the Grand Gallery, one of the most architecturally significant corridors in the entire structure. The scientists were careful, almost strikingly careful, about what they claimed. Mehdi Tioubi, one of the mission's co-directors, told reporters at the time that what they could say with confidence was simply that the void existed, that it was large, and that no existing theory about the pyramid's construction had predicted it. That caution matters, because it's the opposite of how this kind of discovery usually gets treated once it leaves the hands of scientists and enters the wider world. There was no claim of a hidden machine, no claim of a message from a lost civilization. Just an honest, almost startled admission: there is a space in here we didn't know about, and we don't yet know what it was for. That admission is, in its own way, more unsettling than any dramatic claim could be, because the not knowing is real. Unlike the void discovered in 2016 near the chevron structure, which researchers have cautiously connected to construction techniques, this new void, now generally called the Big Void, doesn't fit neatly into any existing model of how the pyramid was assembled. It isn't shaped like a corridor built to relieve structural stress, the way the smaller chambers above the king's chamber clearly are. It isn't positioned where a burial chamber would typically be found. Some researchers have proposed it may be a construction gap, a space left behind by the logistics of hauling stone to increasing heights, something functional rather than symbolic. Others think it may connect to a purpose we simply don't have a name for yet, something that made sense to the builders of a monument we still can't fully explain, and doesn't map cleanly onto anything in our own architectural vocabulary. What makes this genuinely difficult to sit with is not a fabricated verdict from artificial intelligence or invented quotes from anonymous engineers. It's simpler than that and more honest. It's the fact that the people who spent their careers building the most advanced imaging technology available specifically to answer this question looked at the results and, years later, still don't have a definitive answer. Follow-up research has continued. In 2023, a team using a related technique confirmed that behind a peculiar chevron pattern on the pyramid's north face lies a corridor roughly 9 meters long, likely constructed to redistribute the immense weight of the stone above the original entrance. That finding was a genuine step forward. It gave scientists their first confirmed answer to a structural question that had puzzled them for years. But the big void above the Grand Gallery remains, for now, exactly what it was in 2017, detected, measured, mapped in rough outline, and still unexplained. There's something worth sitting with in how differently this story unfolded compared to how these discoveries usually get told once they reach a wider audience. No one needed to invent a hidden machine with moving parts to make this compelling. No one needed to claim that an unbiased artificial intelligence uncovered a conspiracy that career scientists were too afraid to admit. The real story already has everything a good mystery needs. A monument 20 years in the making, guarded by 4,500 years of silence, finally cracked open not by treasure hunters or theorists, but by physicists using particles born in the death throes of distant stars, and by scientists disciplined enough to say, clearly and publicly, we don't know yet, rather than filling that gap with a story that felt more satisfying. It's also worth being honest about why the hidden machine version of this story is so tempting to tell, and so often told. The real construction of the Great Pyramid is already staggering. Around 2560 BCE, a workforce of skilled paid laborers, not slave labor, as we now know from the discovery of organized worker villages, complete with bakeries, medical facilities, and burial sites for the workers themselves, quarried, moved, and stacked over 2 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as 9 tons, with a level of precision that still challenges modern engineers to fully reconstruct. The base of the pyramid is level to within about 2 centimeters across a footprint the size of 10 football fields. Its 4 sides are aligned to true north with an accuracy that would be impressive even with satellite positioning, let alone with tools made of copper and stone. None of that requires an ancient machine, a forgotten global civilization, or an unbiased AI to be remarkable. It requires taking seriously just how capable Bronze Age engineers, organizers, and mathematicians actually were, without needing to borrow drama from stories that aren't true. That doesn't mean every question has been answered, and it certainly doesn't mean skepticism about the official narrative is unreasonable. Real anomalies exist. The precision of certain interior surfaces genuinely is difficult to fully explain using only the tools historically attributed to the era, and researchers continue to debate the exact methods used for the hardest granite work inside the pyramid's core. Real mysteries, like the true purpose of the Big Void, remain genuinely open. The honest version of this story doesn't need to manufacture certainty in either direction, toward we've solved it completely, or toward a lost civilization built a resonating machine to warn us of a coming cataclysm. The honest version says, here is what we measured, here is what we can responsibly conclude from it, and here is the boundary past which we are speculating, and speculation should be labeled as speculation. So what does that leave us? 4,500 years after the last stone was set into place, and less than a decade after physicists first proved that even now, the pyramid has more to show us, it leaves us with a genuinely open case. A monument that has already surrendered secrets it held for over a millennium, discovered not through legend or intuition, but through methodical, patient, peer-reviewed science. It leaves us with a large, confirmed, unexplained void sitting silently above the Grand Gallery, waiting for the next generation of imaging technology, higher resolution muon detectors, ground-penetrating radar, perhaps eventually a small robotic probe threaded through one of the pyramid's narrow shafts, to finally tell us what it is. And it leaves us with a genuinely good question to end on, one that doesn't require inventing anything to be worth asking. If the most advanced civilization of the ancient world could hide a space the size of a passenger jet inside a monument for 4,500 years, so well concealed that not even cosmic rays could confirm it existed until 2017, what else might still be sitting inside that mountain of stone, patiently waiting for us to build the right tool to finally see it? That's not a question that needs a fabricated answer. The not knowing is the story, and it's a far better one than any machine we could have invented to fill the silence.